The Galactic Council's ultimatum. In the year 2257, humanity stood at the precipice of a new age. Earth had long since been united under a single banner, its disparate nations setting aside their differences in the face of the vast wonders and challenges of the cosmos. Human colonies now dotted the stars, thriving outposts of life and culture light years from their ancestral home. But not all welcomed humanity's rapid ascent. The Galactic Council, an ancient alliance of advanced alien races, viewed the young upstart species with growing concern. Humans were seen as unpredictable, their rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion a potential threat to the delicate balance of power that had maintained peace in the galaxy for millennia. The Council convened in an emergency session, representatives from 100 worlds gathering to debate the fate of humanity. After days of heated discourse, they'd reached a decision. An ultimatum was issued. Humanity must submit to the authority of the Council, curtailing their expansion and surrendering their autonomy. Refusal would be met with overwhelming force, a war that humanity could not hope to win. On Earth, the ultimatum was received with a mixture of shock, outrage, and defiance. The idea of bowing to alien dictates, of surrendering the hard-won freedoms that had carried humanity to the stars, was anathema. The president of the United Earth Federation, Nara Patel, spoke for all humanity when she delivered her response to the Council. "We will not submit. We will not surrender our destiny. If you come for us, we will fight. And we will win." The stage was set for a conflict unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity, a young and untested species, standing alone against the might of an ancient alien alliance. It seemed an impossible fight, but humans had always thrived in the face of adversity, their indomitable will and boundless ingenuity their greatest weapons. As Earth braced for war, its colonies were fortified, its fleets marshaled. Scientists and engineers worked feverishly to develop new technologies, knowing that innovation would be key to humanity's survival. But even as they prepared for the worst, few could have anticipated the form that the Council's attack would take. In the depths of space, in the laboratories of the Council's most advanced worlds, a new breed of weapon was being developed. Bioengineered creatures, born and bred for a single purpose: to hunt and kill humans. They were called the Vorg, and they were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. As the Council's fleets massed on the borders of human space, the Vorg were unleashed. Sleek, deadly ships, bearing the distinctive mark of the Council, began to appear in human systems, disgorging their lethal cargo. The Vorg, each one a towering muscular beast with razor-sharp claws and an uncanny intelligence in their dark eyes, began their hunt. The first human colonies fell quickly, their defenses overwhelmed by the sheer ferocity of the Vorg assault. Distress calls echoed across the void as outpost after outpost went dark. On Earth, the news was met with horror and a grim determination. The war had begun, and humanity would fight, no matter the cost. As the Vorg rampaged across human space, Earth's fleets rallied to meet them. Battles erupted, the void lit by the fire of ships and the deadly dance of Vorg and human in the cold vacuum of space. Humans fought with skill and courage, but the Vorg seemed unstoppable, their numbers never depleting, their savagery never diminishing. But even in the darkest of times, hope can be found in the most unexpected of places. As humanity fought for its very survival against the Council's monstrous creations, the seeds of an unlikely alliance were being sown. On a distant, embattled colony, a young soldier named Asha was about to make a discovery that would change the course of the war and the fate of humanity itself. The predators unleashed. The colony of New Eden was burning. Asha raced through the chaos of the settlement, her heart pounding in time with the staccato bursts of gunfire and the screams of the dying. She had been a soldier for less than a year, a raw recruit thrust into the front lines of a war that threatened to consume all of humanity. Above, the sky was darkened by the hulking shapes of Council warships, their sleek hulls glinting in the flames that engulfed the colony. They had come without warning, A Vorg attack ship breaching the colony's defenses before anyone had a chance to react. Asha had been on patrol on the outskirts of the settlement when the attack began. She had watched in horror as the Vorg ship disgorged its cargo. The monstrous bioengineered predators leaping from the ship's hold and charging towards the colony with terrifying speed. She had raced back to the settlement, firing her weapon at the charging beasts, watching in dismay as her shots glanced off their thick hides. The Vorg were relentless, tearing through the colony's defenses like they were made of paper, leaving a trail of bloody destruction in their wake. Now, as Asha fought her way through the rubble-strewn streets, she couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness that threatened to overwhelm her. The colony's defenses had been overrun, its people slaughtered. She had seen friends and comrades fall, torn apart by the Vorg's razor-sharp claws. Suddenly, a movement caught her eye. A Vorg, larger than any she had seen before, was stalking towards a group of civilians huddled in the ruins of a building. Asha didn't hesitate. She charged forward, firing her weapon at the beast, drawing its attention away from the helpless civilians. The Vorg turned, its dark eyes fixing on Asha. It let out a roar that shook the ground and charged. Asha stood her ground, firing until her weapon clicked empty. The Vorg kept coming, its hide absorbing the shots like they were nothing. In a flash, the beast was upon her. Asha felt the wind knocked from her lungs as she was slammed to the ground, the Vorg's claws digging into her armor. She stared up into the creature's eyes, seeing nothing but a feral, implacable hunger. But as she braced herself for the killing blow, something strange happened. The Vorg hesitated, its claws hovering inches from Asha's throat. It tilted its head, as if considering her, its eyes narrowing. In that moment, Asha saw something in the creature's gaze that she had never expected to see. Not just intelligence, but curiosity. A flicker of something that was almost recognition. Acting on instinct, hardly believing what she was doing, Asha slowly raised her hand. The Vorg tensed, but did not strike. Slowly, impossibly, Asha rested her hand on the creature's snout. For a long moment, human and Vorg stared at each other, a strange understanding passing between them. Then, to Asha's amazement, the Vorg stepped back, releasing her from its grip. Asha scrambled to her feet, her heart racing. The Vorg watched her, its stance no longer aggressive, but almost expectant. Around them, the battle still raged, but for Asha, everything had changed. She knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that this creature would not harm her. More than that, she sensed a potential in the Vorg that no one had ever considered, a potential for understanding, for cooperation. Asha looked at the Vorg, a plan forming in her mind. It was a crazy idea, one that might get her court-martialed or worse. But if it worked, it could change everything. "Come with me," she said to the Vorg, hardly believing the words as she said them. "I think we have a lot to learn from each other." The Vorg tilted its head, as if considering. Then, to Asha's amazement, it took a step towards her, a step that would be the first on a journey that would reshape the galaxy. An unexpected bond. The journey back to Earth was a tense one. Asha sat in the hold of the transport ship, the Vorg crouched beside her. It had taken all her persuasive skills, and no small amount of threats, to convince her superiors to allow her to bring the creature back alive. Many had argued for its immediate execution, seeing it as nothing more than a dangerous beast. But Asha had been adamant. She had seen something in this creature, something that could potentially turn the tide of the war. She just needed the chance to prove it. As the ship navigated the war-torn space lanes, Asha spent every waking moment with the Vorg. She observed it, trying to understand its behavior, its motivations. And slowly, extraordinarily, a bond began to form between them. Asha discovered that the Vorg was highly intelligent, capable of understanding complex commands and even showing signs of emotional response. She began to train it, using hand signals and vocal cues, and to her amazement, the Vorg responded. Within days, Asha was able to get the Vorg to follow basic commands: sit, stay, come, but more than that, she began to sense a deep understanding growing between them. The Vorg seemed to trust her, to look to her for guidance. As news of Ash's progress spread through the ship, others began to take notice. Some were skeptical, dismissing Ash's claims as wishful thinking. But others, including some of the ship's highest-ranking officers, saw the potential in what Asha had accomplished. By the time the ship reached Earth, Ash's Vorg was the talk of the fleet. As she disembarked, the creature walking calmly by her side, she was met by a delegation of Earth's top military brass. At first, they were cautious, even hostile. The idea of working with a Vorg, of treating it as anything other than a target, was anathema to everything they had been fighting for. But as Asha demonstrated the Vorg's capabilities, their skepticism began to waver. She showed how the Vorg could be used in combat, its strength and speed making it a formidable ally on the battlefield. But more than that, she argued, the Vorg could be the key to understanding the Council's strategy, even to negotiating a peace. It was a radical proposition, one that many struggled to accept. But with each passing day, as more reports came in of the devastation being wrought by the Vorg attacks, the idea began to gain traction. A special task force was formed, with Asha at its head. Their mission: to capture more Vorg, to study them, and to attempt to replicate the bond that Asha had formed with her own creature. It was a daunting task, one that would require venturing into the heart of Vorg-controlled space. But Asha was undaunted. She had seen the potential in these creatures, the possibility for a new kind of relationship between human and Vorg. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be setbacks and challenges at every turn. But as she looked at her Vorg, saw the trust and understanding in its eyes, she knew it would be worth it. This was a chance to change the course of history, to forge a new path for humanity and the galaxy. As the task force prepared to embark, Asha felt a sense of purpose settle over her. She knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, that she might not come back. But she also knew that she was part of something bigger now, something that could change everything. With her Vorg by her side, Asha stepped onto the transport ship, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the bond between human and Vorg would be the key to it all. Taming the beasts. The task force's first mission was a disaster. They had attempted to capture a Vorg on a remote colony world, using Asha's techniques, but the creature had been too wild, too aggressive. In the ensuing chaos, several soldiers had been killed, and the Vorg had been put down. It was a sobering reminder of the challenges they faced. The Vorg were not domesticated animals, but vicious predators bred for war. Taming them would not be a matter of simple training, but of forging a deep, almost primal bond. Asha refused to be discouraged. She pored over the data from the mission, looking for clues, for any insight that might help them succeed. And slowly, patterns began to emerge. She realized that the key was not to subdue the Vorg, but to communicate with them, to show them that humans could be allies, not just enemies. It was a delicate process, one that required immense patience and no small amount of courage. Over the next few months, the task force refined their techniques. They learned how to approach the Vorg, how to read their body language and respond accordingly. They discovered that each Vorg was unique, with its own personality and quirks. Slowly, incrementally, they began to make progress. The first successful capture was a moment of triumph, a validation of everything Asha had been working towards. But it was only the beginning. As more Vorg were brought in, the real work began. Each creature had to be carefully studied, its behavior analyzed and understood. And then, the slow process of bonding could begin. It was not easy. There were setbacks, moments when it seemed that the Vorg would never accept human partnership. But Asha and her team persevered, driven by the knowledge that this was humanity's best hope. And gradually, miraculously, the Vorg began to respond. They started to work with their human handlers, to follow commands and show signs of affection. The bonds that formed were unlike anything anyone had ever seen, a strange and wonderful melding of two utterly different species. As word of the task force's success spread, the tide of the war began to turn. Human Vorg teams were deployed to the front lines, and their effectiveness was immediately clear. The Vorg's strength and ferocity, combined with human strategy and ingenuity, made them an unstoppable force. The Council, who had been so sure of their victory, found themselves on the back foot. Their own Vorg, uncontrolled and vicious, were no match for the coordinated attacks of the human Vorg teams. But even as the battle turned in humanity's favor, Asha knew that the real challenge still lay ahead. The Vorg were not just weapons, but living, sentient creatures. If humans were to truly win this war, they needed to find a way to coexist with their former enemies. It was a daunting prospect, one that would require a fundamental shift in the way humans saw the galaxy and their place in it. But Asha was determined to see it through. She began to work not just with the Vorg, but with the Council itself. Using her unique position as the bridge between human and Vorg, she opened up lines of communication, started negotiations. It was a fraught process, one that was met with resistance on both sides. Many humans still saw the Vorg as nothing more than beasts, while the Council struggled to accept the idea of humans as equals. But Asha persevered, driven by her vision of a galaxy where human and Vorg could live and work side by side. And slowly, incrementally, the tide began to turn. As the war ground to a stalemate, both sides exhausted and bloodied, the prospect of peace began to seem not just possible, but necessary. And in the end, it was the Vorg themselves who tipped the balance. In a moment that would go down in history, a delegation of Vorg, led by Asha's own partner, walked into the Council chambers. They bowed their heads, not in submission, but in respect, and offered a clawed hand in friendship. It was a moment that changed everything. A moment that showed that even the most implacable of enemies could find common ground, could forge a new future together. And as Asha watched, tears in her eyes, she knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but she had seen the potential in the Vorg, in the bond between human and alien. She knew that if they could walk that road together, there was nothing they couldn't achieve. The galaxy, vast and wondrous and terrifying, awaited them, and they would face it, human and Vorg, side by side. Turning the tide. The alliance between humans and Vorg changed the face of the war. What had once seemed like an inevitable defeat for humanity now became a battle on equal footing. The Council, so long secure in their superiority, found themselves challenged at every turn. On planet after planet, human Vorg teams struck at the heart of the Council's forces. The Vorg's strength and ferocity, tempered now by human strategy and empathy, proved a formidable combination. Council outposts fell, their fleets were driven back, and for the first time in centuries, the balance of power in the galaxy began to shift. But the Council would not go down easily. They threw every resource they had into the fight, deploying new and terrifying weapons, genetic monstrosities that made the Vorg seem tame by comparison. The war entered a new phase, a desperate, brutal struggle for survival. Across the galaxy, battles raged, planets burned, and countless lives were lost on both sides. It was a time of darkness, of fear and despair. But through it all, the human-Vorg alliance held strong. Asha and her team worked tirelessly, coordinating attacks, sharing intelligence, and always looking for a way to end the war. And slowly, incrementally, their efforts began to pay off. The Council's forces, stretched thin and demoralized, started to make mistakes. A key outpost would fall, a vital supply line would be cut, and bit by bit, the tide began to turn. But the real breakthrough came not on the battlefield, but in the halls of diplomacy. As the war raged on, Asha had been working quietly behind the scenes, reaching out to those within the Council who had grown weary of the endless conflict. She spoke to them of the bond between human and Vorg, of the potential for a new kind of relationship between the species of the galaxy. She showed them the progress that had been made, the way that human and Vorg could work together, live together, in peace. And to her surprise, some listened. There were those within the council who had grown tired of the endless cycle of war and retribution, who yearned for a different way. Slowly, cautiously, they began to reach back. It was a delicate process, fraught with risk and uncertainty. But Asha persevered, driven by her unwavering belief in the possibility of peace. And gradually, a fragile network of communication and trust began to grow. The turning point came on the eve of what was to be the largest battle of the war. The Council, in a last desperate gamble, had amassed a fleet unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. They were poised to strike at the heart of human space, to end the war in one decisive blow. But they never got the chance. As the Council fleet prepared to jump, a message came through, a communication from the highest levels of the Council leadership. They had been in secret talks with Asha and her allies, and they had come to a decision. The war was over. The Council was ready to negotiate a truce. The news spread like wildfire, rippling out across the battlefields and command centers of the galaxy. For a moment, there was stunned silence, a sense of disbelief that the end could come so suddenly, so unexpectedly. And then, jubilation. On 1,000 worlds, humans and Vorg alike celebrated, cheering and weeping with the realization that the long nightmare was finally over. In the days and weeks that followed, the truce was formalized, treaties were signed, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding began. It would not be easy. There was so much damage to repair, so many wounds to heal. But for the first time in generations, there was hope. The alliance between human and Vorg, once so unthinkable, had become the foundation for a new era of peace and cooperation. Asha, the architect of this new world, found herself at the center of it all. She was hailed as a hero, the savior of humanity and the galaxy. But for her, the real reward was something simpler, something more profound. It was the knowledge that she had been part of something greater than herself, that she had helped to forge a bond that would endure long after she was gone. She had shown that even in the darkest of times, there was always the potential for understanding, for empathy, for peace. As she stood on the bridge of her ship, looking out at the stars that had once been the battleground of a galaxy-spanning war, Asha felt a sense of profound gratitude and hope. The universe was vast and wondrous and full of possibility, and thanks to the bond between human and Vorg, they would face it together, not as enemies, but as friends, as allies, as fellow travelers in the great cosmic journey. It was a new beginning, a chance to build a better future for all the beings of the galaxy. And Asha knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would meet them head-on, with the strength and courage and compassion that had brought them to this point. The war was over. The real work was just beginning, but with human and Vorg side by side, anything was possible. The galaxy awaited, and they would meet it together.